This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Kathryn Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here will focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. Whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Kathryn Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so honored you're here. Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to the podcast. Okay, so I should come clean and tell you that today's podcast is going to be a little different than what we usually do. Normally, you hear me chat a little bit about why this episode is going to be great. And then I interview someone amazing. And then I come back at the end and kind of give you my 2-minute take. Today, you just get me. So I don't know if I qualify as an amazing guest, but you just get me. And really, this is the podcast episode that I wish had existed all those years ago when we were admitted to the NICU for the first time. So if you have a friend, a neighbor, someone you love, or if it's you and you're in the NICU and you do not know how to even start with this place that you find yourself in, this podcast episode, this one right here, this one's for you. So I'm going to start with a letter that I wrote to myself when I was 4 years post NICU. So it was about 10 years ago I wrote this letter. I'm going to read this letter to you because it was the letter that I wish someone had written to me. So we're going to start there. And then I'm going to chat about and dive into 3 different areas. 1, how to advocate for you and your baby. Number 2, how to let people help you and receive help. And 3rd, where to go for resources for mental health. And I think and hope that this episode will be one that you can come back to a few months after your NICU stay or a few years after your NICU stay and listen to it and say, hot dang, we have come a long way. But I also know that where you are today is a really hard place to be. So I don't want to say that I'm going to apologize if I cry, because I'm not going to apologize for my tears. They come from a deep and holy place, but give me some grace if I have to pause. Your AirPods are not deceiving you. I just maybe need a minute. Okay, let's start with that letter. Y'all ready? Here we go. Dear NICU Mama, all those years ago, I wish I had known lots of things. I wish I would have known that my hands would no longer be recognizable from all the hand washing, or that people would say things that were meant to be nice, but they really just cut to the core of our reality. Things like, oh, you're so lucky you get to rest while someone else babysits your baby. What I really wanted to say was, darling, I hardly slept a wink. I was on the phone with a night nurse, quizzing her endlessly about my son and his recent annex. I would hardly call my every 3-hour pumping sessions as restful. I wish someone had told me that it was okay to cry when I left my son each night in the NICU, and completely normal to cry when I left my 4 other children at home to go see him. I wish I had known that the feeling of helplessness that manifested itself during our 44-day NICU stay would fade away and then reemerge at the most inopportune times. I wish that someone had told me I didn't have to go it alone. I wish someone had told me that I was doing enough, loving my son Luke enough, that I was bathing him right, pumping correctly, sitting at his side the right amount of time, loving my other children the same, giving my husband love and encouragement, updating my friends and family. But it always felt like I was treading in the deep end. We would get crazy awesome news, only to be sucker punched the next day. Some people call it the NICU roller coaster. I call it the 3rd ring of hell. What I came to realize through our NICU stay and subsequent surgeries, hospital stays, and endless specialist and therapist visits is one very simple lesson. I learned to love, despite all the odds. It's hard to do, that love thing, with all the beeping and the coding, all the nurses running, charts clicking, and specialists knocking. It's hard to see where you want to be when you look around and hardly know where you are. For me, I found love in the smallest of moments. It was always those seconds when my heart dropped and all I could see was the black hole of despair. that God would creep in and shine his light. Sometimes I told him to get the F away, but mostly I listened. There was the day our son had his MRI, an unexpected order from a newly gained specialist, neurosurgery. The news was not good. I closed the curtain to our bay, turned down the lights, put Luke in my arms, and began to feel sorry for myself. I'm fairly certain I went through half a box of tissues that day. And then I heard it. Every NICU mom knows that the quick feet of nurses running down the hallway and the hurried feet of the pediatric surgeon are never good. For more than 20 minutes, I watched the activity below that 2-foot space between the curtain and the floor. And then came the tears. A mom screamed, "No." And I knew. The NICU fell silent. So during my pity party, a baby had died. And that just seemed like the unfairest of unfair things to ever happen to anyone. An hour later, our sweet red-eyed NICU nurses welcomed another emergency transport, another miracle, another life to save, and the hum of the NICU continued, but not without all of us knowing that the NICU never makes promises. There were moments of sisterhood, too. As another mom and I shared stories at the scrub-in sink, what began as two strangers washing away germs turned into a genuine friendship that continues today. Who knew that the nasty-smelling hospital soap could bring someone that amazing into my life? The NICU Club isn't for sissies. It's for fighters. Time to dig out your big girl meshy panties and pony up, ladies. I wish I could tell you that your baby will be fine or that you'll be home in a jiff. I wish I could tell you that prematurity won't have lasting developmental effects or that you won't suffer from PTSD. Every journey is different. Every baby, every hospital, every specialist, every outcome, they're all different. As I look back on our journey, I see a changed woman in the mirror. I see one who is determined to be an advocate for her son. I see a mom who has a deepened appreciation for life and a greater empathy for difficult situations. I see a heart full of gratitude. I see a survivor who also really needs to get more concealer. If you're watching on tube, you can appreciate that. While the world gives a nod to prematurity awareness every fall, all I have to do is look into Luke's eyes and know its true meaning. Prematurity can happen to anyone, but it doesn't have to define who you are or who your child will become. Dream big. Order that size 2T toddler t-shirt and know that it may not be worn for months or years, but order it anyway. Stand up to a specialist, trust your instinct, and love that baby with all you've got. As one of my favorite artists, Brandon Heath, sings, "Love is right here. Love is alive. Love is the arms that are holding you. Love never fails you." It's true. Wipe away the tears and know that you are not alone. So many of us have sat in that NICU rocking chair thinking the same things that you fear and hope and know and want. We get it. Now go love on your baby. Love a NICU mom who has your back. I loved that letter when I wrote it 10 years ago. I loved reading that letter to you. And I hope that as you heard that you felt less alone. I can tell you that in 2009, when we found ourselves in the NICU, I have never in my life felt more alone. So few of our friends knew what it was like to be in the neonatal intensive care unit. So many of them wanted to help, but nobody knew what to do. And that was sort of at the advent of the beginning of the social media season. So I would sometimes post things on Facebook. But the NICU is not an Instagram-worthy place. You can't succinctly share your heart in a square and 100 characters on Twitter. Like it doesn't work that way, nor should it be that way, because it is a hard place to be, and it will change your life. It'll change your baby's life. It'll change your family's life. My hope is that it'll change it for the better and not for the worse. And I think over these last 14 years, there are lots of things that we've learned. I have Really loved bringing all these guests to you every week about different topics and different ways in which you can survive and thrive in the NICU. But today I wanted to talk about some specific things to you as the NICU mom. Specifically, you're there and maybe feeling overwhelmed and a little frustrated, maybe a little scared, tired, I'm sure. You're sore. There's a lot of things you're feeling. And so the first thing that I want to talk about is, how do you advocate for your baby and how do you advocate for yourself? This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app, join one of our support groups, or find one-to-one support, enjoy counseling, find loss and bereavement support, participate in a peer-to-peer mentor program, or check out our news, articles, and family stories at handtohold.org. All of that is at no cost to you. Hand to Hold's mission is to provide personalized support before, during, and after a NICU stay to help ensure that all NICU families thrive. Well, I think the first thing that you should do is give yourself some grace, okay? Because no one, you don't go to NICU school before you get there and then pass with flying colors and everyone's like, you're so amazing, you did the NICU right. It is a series of learning things the hard way, and a lot of highs and a lot of lows, and then a lot of just average days in between. So one thing that we did that I found to be incredibly helpful is that I had a sheet of paper. It can be a notebook, it can be a journal, and a pen next to our son's bed. And every time I would think of a question that I either wanted to ask his nurse or his primary nurse, which is the nurse that primarily takes care of your baby, or one of his specialists, I would write it down. And my nurses knew that they could look in there. So let's say that the neurosurgeon came by and I had this big question for him, then the nurses could ask or be like, hey, Kathryn has this question for you. And they would either ask it or I would ask it the next time I saw the neurosurgeon, because sometimes in the moment when a specialist comes to see you, you're just like your mind completely goes blank and you're like, I had 50,000 questions for you and now I can remember one. And then the moment that they walk out of the door and you don't see them for several days, you remember the 999,000 other questions that you wanted to ask them. So I found that to be a really good tool for me. It also helped me process some things. I know sometimes people have the tendency to process things on social media. And while I think that can be good, I think there's great community that you can find in hashtags like NICU mom or preemie mom or NICU baby, whatever. There are some things I think that need to be processed by yourself or with a specialist or with your spouse or your partner, or with a doctor. And so not everything has to be shared in real time. And that little journal was my sort of filter. Okay, I'm going to write this down. And then so this was back in the blogging days, should I blog about this, right? So that was one thing that I learned how to do when it came to advocating for me and my baby. Another thing when we talk about giving yourself grace is there may be some procedures that your baby has to undergo that may be very difficult for you to witness. Give yourself the grace to not be there, to appoint someone else. Maybe it's a close friend or a close family member, and you're like, I need you to be there because I can't, until you have the courage and the strength to be there yourself. Or maybe right off the bat, you can be there, but just give yourself the grace. You don't know how your body is going to respond or react to something really hard. There was a moment when our son had to have an IV placed, which usually they blow their IVs every 3 or 4 days, which means that they have one and then their veins are little and they blow it and then they have to move to another location. But because his veins were so puny, the best veins, just in case you're wondering, are in their scalps, on their heads. And so that was a really difficult day for me when they started that IV and I started to have a panic attack. And the nurse looked at me and she goes, Mom, if you need to take a minute, you can go sit in that rocking chair and come back when you're ready. And I did. I went and sat in that rocking chair and I thought, I can't do this. This is too hard. I am the most unequipped, ill-prepared person to be this kid's mom because I can't even stand by his bedside while he gets an IV. And I took some deep breaths, fast forward 44 days, and then months later, when he was rehospitalized for different things, I was the one showing the nurses how to start IVs, catheters, administer things, because I had done it before. I had seen it and I had been present before, and it just took me some time. So give yourself some grace and know that as your baby gets stronger and overcomes challenges, you are going to do the same thing. The third thing is, I think I'm on my third thing, is make sure that you ask the questions. And I mean all the questions. They may seem silly to you, or they may seem like, hey, didn't they just answer that? Ask it again. It's okay. That you are your baby's best advocate. You're the one that they rely on. So those doctors know medicine, right? Maybe they graduated some really impressive Ivy Leagues. Maybe it's Yale or Harvard or MIT. I don't know where they went to school. And that can sometimes feel overwhelming, like, oh, they understand medicine. I don't want to question them. Y'all, please ask the question. Because in order for you to find peace and know what the next best step is, you're going to have to ask for help and you're going to have to ask the questions. So that little journal that I had and those questions that I wrote down were really instrumental in me learning how to be a good advocate for my son. I think it was years later, we were at a specialist visit and I was sort of relaying Luke's extensive medical history. And the doctor looked at me and said, "Oh, are you in the medical community?" And I looked at him and I said, "I'm a NICU mom." And he laughed and he's like, "Man, all you NICU moms are the same." So you learn along the way and you become an expert in whatever diagnosis or anomaly it is that your child has. And no one knows your child better than you. So don't be intimidated by a specialist, because the totality of their history and their life lies with you, not with that doctor. And so it's okay to stand up to them, to ask them why, and to help you understand how to be a good advocate. So that this is my encouragement to you, to give yourself some grace and time to get there, but be an advocate. It's what you were born to do, is to help your baby grow and thrive. Okay, the second one it was really hard for me. Okay, so the second point is let people help you. Back in 2009, well, let's be honest, I am still top A, happy to be in control kind of mom, but I was like extra in 2009. Okay, I had not learned to let some things go. And when we walked into the NICU, we knew at about 20 weeks gestationally that we were going to be in the NICU. And so I did a little bit of research, but we didn't really think that it was going to be critical, right? So I had about 20 weeks. Well, I had 16 weeks to prepare for our NICU stay. Our son was born at 36 weeks, 3 days, a little over 3 pounds at birth. And but you may be walking in and you have no idea what to expect. I just thought, okay, we're going to be in there like a couple of weeks, feeder grower, and then we're going to blow out of there. So it's really not going to be this big disturbance to our life. Okay, let's get it together, Kathryn. The reality is that it was a huge disturbance to our life, and my type A control freak could only go so far. Okay, and I tried really hard to maintain our household. I tried really hard to maintain our marriage while also managing all of Luke's medical and all the needs that he had in the hospital. And what I quickly realized as things started crashing and burning at home is that I needed to accept help, and it was the most difficult part of our NICU stay to admit that I was not enough for my baby. You may have a list of things, and I found this to be helpful. Writing down a list of things that you can outsource: cleaning your house, cooking meals for your family, picking up other kids from school, mowing your lawn, going to the grocery store, picking up medications. There are many things that you can make a list of that you can outsource. Other people can do. Trusted friends and family members, neighbors, maybe it's your church community. There are many people that you can ask to sort of pick up the slack in whatever your community may look like. And then there are certain things that only you can do as the mom. So I'm speaking to the moms right here, right now, and dads. There's only certain things that you and the mom, as a mom or a dad, can do for your baby. So making the list of things that I could outsource, and then making the shorter list of the things that only I could do, I realized that there were many ways in which I could have people help our family. Maybe when someone says, "What can we do?" Or my favorite was, "Let us know if we can do anything." And I'm like, "What are you doing today at 4 o'clock? Because we need milk and eggs." Okay, so I put people to work. But I had some pretty good, and I learned this early on, really good boundaries to put in place. So instead of calling people back, I would either text or email them, mostly because we were in the hospital and it was really difficult to carry on a conversation or a FaceTime call because either a specialist was in the room. I was trying to be mindful of the other NICU babies and families that were in the NICU. We were in two different ones, one with lots of beds around us and one that was a little more isolated, but still it's really hard to have those conversations. And then secondly, it was exhausting to have to replay everything that was going on with our son. So I found that texts and emails allowed me to just focus on, this is how your help can be utilize best, or this is how you can pray for us today, or this is how you can help us today. And then I could decide if I responded back or not. Whereas in a phone call, it's a little bit trickier. So you also might consider like a family spokesperson or a website, or back then it was blogging, but some way that you can publish or share. These are the things that are going on with our child, and these are the ways in which you can help. That way, it takes the onus out of you always having to respond to people, and it becomes a place where people can go. And if you have a designated spokesperson, they can sort of be the buffer between you and all the people that want to help you. And you're going to have some friends who are not going to understand that, and you're going to lose some friends. You're not doing it wrong. They just don't know how to enter into suffering. They're just not ready yet. And hopefully life will cycle them back into your life. But you don't owe anyone an explanation for what it is that you're going through. You owe your baby and your family the very best that you can give them. And if someone else can't manage that, that's on them, not on you. So this designated spokesperson, and then also having an easy way to communicate with people, I found to be really helpful when it came to accepting and receiving help, which again is hard to do. But what I loved about it is that at the time, I think I sort of felt guilty. Like, all these people are doing all these things for us, and there's no way I will ever be able to repay them. And you know what? I was right. I wasn't necessarily able to repay them. But years and months later, when other families were going through hard things, whether it was a NICU stay or even something, a different trauma, I was able to pour into them. And that was the benefit of having received all that help and been grateful for it. And then the way that I repaid it was that I helped other families in a similar situation because I knew how it felt to ask and receive help. So know that your time is coming. Receive the help that you need when you can for as long as you can, and know that your time will come when you can be on the other side of that. And then the third part is resources for mental health. How do you find that? Well, I can tell you this, is that all 14 years ago, let me say this. Mental health did not have the reputation that it has now, because back then it was super hush hush. No one wanted to talk about it. I don't even think that I knew that resources were there or available. And now it is a much bigger deal. In fact, earlier this year, we did a whole month, back in June, a whole series on mental health, psychologists, psychiatrists, the whole 9 yards, counseling, all of it. And I can tell you that there are many more resources that are readily available and easy to find. So I would start with your primary care nurse or your charge nurse or even your NICU nurse and asking, is there a nonprofit that exists? Certainly you can log on to handtohold.org, and there are many, many free resources for you, your children, so the siblings of the NICU baby, your spouse, your partner, and you specifically, that are free to you. So log on there. Maybe there's the Ronald McDonald House, or maybe there are other local charities or national charities who have local offices, and they have resources available to you to use. Please use them. So you can start with your nurses. You can ask your specialist. It may be your pediatrician or maybe your OB-GYN, and say, hey, this is the thing that we are struggling with. Maybe you're struggling to pay your bills. Okay. Maybe you're struggling to pay all the medical stuff that's going on, or you need like a patient advocate. Okay. Every hospital has a patient advocate. There are even patient advocates within your insurance. So you can ask your insurance company, I need a patient advocate. And that advocate for us helped us discover things that were available to us that were covered by insurance and sort of kept all of our paperwork and helped us, like, do we need a letter from this doctor? We need documentation about this diagnosis. And she was a real resource for us. And that was all supplied to us by our insurance company for free. Well, we didn't have to pay an additional fee for her. I will say that was a resource that our insurance company provided for us. The Social Security office and supplemental and disability. So there are lots of organizations that exist to help you financially, emotionally, psychologically, physically, tap into those. Ask people. I found that I would get plugged into preemie groups and I would find these preemie moms and I would say, what resources do you have that I need to know about? Or how are you, this seems like a really big deal. How are you figuring that out? And then I would learn of another resource. So they're out there. You just have to plug into the communities to help you find them. So it may be that your baby has long-term care and maybe you need medical equipment, right? So talk to moms who have babies who have medical equipment and help navigate that system. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to find the resources. And mostly it's just opening your mouth. I mean, that's the beautiful part of social media now and hashtags is that you can hashtag it. There's probably a Facebook group or an Instagram account that has those resources and those people right there. And you can be discerning about what your family needs and what you need to use to get through the hard thing that you're going through. But so many things exist that you do not have to create on your own. And then the last thing, and I mentioned it earlier, and I think it's worth saying again, is that the NICU is not a Instagram photo shoot. It's not your social media content. And you are going through a really difficult and hard thing, and you're not obligated to share the real-time details of that with anybody until you're ready. So maybe it's something that you write down and you share later, or quite frankly, maybe you just never share it publicly later, but instead you work through it with your family and your spouse and partner or a therapist. And it's okay to do that too. So moms and dads, if you are new to the NICU, there is an amazing community of people that want to help you, that want to be present for you and show you these are all the things that exist and this is how you're going to get through it. And we also know how hard it is to be you because we've been there. So as you navigate the next weeks or months or more than a year in the neonatal intensive care unit, you're not alone. Please log on to handlehold.org to find out how they can help you. And as I sit here recording this podcast, thinking of how far we've come in the last 14 years, I am in awe of how far we have come. And it is my life's greatest honor to help other NICU moms and dads come out on the other side of a NICU stay feeling like they weren't completely broken, but that they learned how to love better and that they learned how to live better because they were willing to take care of themselves so that they could take care of their babies. And with that, we'll chat next time. Thanks, y'all, for listening to NICU Babies Parent Support. Every parent and every experience is welcome here. If you are a NICU parent and you're finding yourself in need of support, please download our app. You can find it in the Apple Store or on Google Play, Hand to Hold. And if you love today's episode, you can share it, you can subscribe, and you can most certainly review it. We would love, love, love your reviews. It's how we reach more NICU parents. Thanks, and I'll see y'all next time.